I'm Nicole Arcello, and welcome to In Behalf of Animals. As vegans, we get hit with a lot of questions from our not yet vegan friends, family, and strangers too. These questions range from our use of sugar to gluten, but the most common question I am asked is, "Oh, you're vegan? You eat fish, right?" It's frustrating for sure. But maybe we, as animal advocates, aren't doing enough for the fishes and other aquatic animals on this planet. I think we need to think about them more and include them in our advocacy. It can be as simple as educating our friends and family and sharing posts on social media to give these animals a voice. Well, today we're going to arm you with a lot of information about some of our ocean dwelling friends, actions you can take for them today, and for our animal loving friends not quite there yet, we are going to talk about food and recipes to keep fish and all aquatic animals off of your plate. I am so excited to sit down with Mary Finelli, president and founder of Fish Feel, to talk about why fish are not a benign presence on human plates, but sentient beings deserving of our compassion and our advocacy too. I hope this inspires you to think about fish, shrimp, lobster as animals equal to dogs, cats, cows, pigs, and of course, equal to us as well. Here's my conversation with Mary Finelli. Hi, Mary. Welcome to In Behalf of Animals.
Hello, Nicole. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you so much for being here. It really means a lot to me to have you here and to share all of your knowledge and all of your work with our listeners. And I just want to say first that if I had $1 for every person who said, "Oh, so you're vegan? You eat fish, right?" I'd probably be close to a millionaire by now. So it really, really frustrates me that people in 2024 don't understand fish, don't understand lobsters, crabs, shrimp, and that they are animals and that vegans and vegetarians, for the most part, do not eat them. So I would like to start out with a question. Why do people think that the consumption of fish is like this benign act? And why don't people give fish moral consideration?
Yes, it really is exasperating, and I certainly understand how you feel, and I share
Mm,
your feeling. But I think it is understandable given our social conditioning about fishes. Like if you
right.
think, for example, what other animal is it considered not only all right to kill, but also to torture for fun, which is what fishing is, so-called sport fishing, and there's really nothing sporting about it. The fish are victims, they're not willing participants.
Right.
But our society has such a moral blind spot when it comes to fishes. And I refer to them as fishes just because I'd like to indicate that they are, well, it is the biological term when you're referring to more than one species of fish, but also increasingly people are using it to indicate that they are individuals with their own unique personalities. So often, for example, when they
Mhm.
say the number of fishes who are caught, they'll give it in tons rather than individual animals.
Right.
So just like people to know that each of these animals is a unique sentient being with their own individual personalities. But I mean, really, even just look at some of our laws. For example, fishes are not included in the Humane Slaughter Act. They're not included in the Animal Welfare Act. They're exempt from a lot of anti-cruelty statutes. They're not even defined as animals in a lot of these laws.
Right.
And for example, a lot of your listeners may recall, for example, the Starkist tuna commercials where they have Charlie Tuna and he wants to be caught. It's just this real blind spot that fishes are not sentient. And in the past, there was not that much evidence of their sentience that was publicly known. But that fortunately that is changing now, and increasingly people are realizing that they are just as sentient as any other beings, and just as deserving of respect and compassion as any other sentient beings.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought up that point about how they're measured in tons and not in how many fish. Like we talk about the billions of farmed animals, that are killed every year and they can count it. So fish are just weighed and that's it. Um, So, and I want you to talk about, roll right into it, the fish sentience. And I know there was just another study that I think came out recently that talked about this. But what kinds of things do we know about fish that we didn't know before? How they think, they feel, they don't want to die, right? They feel pain, they have emotions, and they have families. And tell us more about that.
Right. And I mean, it has been scientifically known that fish do have a complex nervous system. And in the more recent years, it's been shown that they also have pain receptors. But so many people don't think that fish can feel. That's why we named the organization Fish Feel. It's
I
just
love
so
that.
basic.
Mm-hmm.
They do have a complex nervous system. They have pain receptors. They've been shown to behave in ways that indicate they are experiencing pain when they're exposed to painful stimuli. Um, and for example, they will stop eating. They'll go into seclusion. If they have an injury, they'll rub that area, favor that area. So there's, you know, very compelling, really overwhelming evidence that they are sentient.
Right.
And just imagine, how could an animal survive in nature if they were not able to experience pain and try to avoid that pain then and in the future? So it's just really common sense. It should be common sense that they are
Right.
sentient. And there is so much scientific evidence now. There's a book by Victoria Braithwaite. She was professor of fisheries and biology at Penn State University,
Mm-hmm.
and she wrote the book "Do Fish Feel Pain?" and very eloquently explains the scientific basis. And the answer, of course, is yes, they do feel pain. And more recently, the book "What a Fish Knows" by Jonathan Balcom, which is he's an ethologist, and he was finding all these scientific studies, and he thought if the public knew just how amazing, perceptive, and intelligent and sensitive these animals are, it would so change their perception of them. And that's really a terrific book, "What a Fish Knows." But in the last couple decades, there's been so much scientific evidence studying these animals and showing that they are indeed sentient, intelligent, perceptive beings.
Wow. There's so much out there, and people still aren't aware because they don't take the time to learn, or even the fact that people still go fishing and they do catch and release. I remember doing this with my father when I was very young, and the fish had a hook in his mouth, and we took the hook out and threw the fish back like this fish was just an object. And I remember after going vegan, I just felt so horrible about that I just thought that fish were just objects, and they're clearly not. So can you tell me about how a fish becomes food? Because I think that's really important too. I think, we look at slaughterhouse videos and things with pigs and chickens and cows, but how do fish go from the ocean to people's plates?
Yes, and just going back a moment,
Mm,
um, that's very interesting, about you, and you're not alone in
mm.
having gone fishing and then ultimately realizing how
Yeah.
cruel that is and
Mm.
stopping. And we actually have a page on our website called Your Page, and we have numerous accounts of people who have, had that same experience. And it's not surprising because there is such a big push for people to go fishing. Um, it's heavily promoted. For one thing, they want to sell fishing licenses and they want to sell
Oh,
fishing
yes.
gear, and
Mhm.
even the boat companies want to sell boats and all. And especially for children, there's something called youth fishing rodeos, and this is something that's taking place all across the country, promoted by um, government agencies, fish and wildlife agencies, and also by fishing companies, and even by police departments and so many other agencies that are trying to get kids to go fishing to kind of hook them on fishing, because it is losing popularity. And so they're really making a big push to get kids,
Yeah, that's
not
awful.
only children, but also women and disabled people, elderly, anyone they can get to go
Mhm.
fishing. So, you know, but as far as how a fish, okay, well, fishing is a huge industry, of course, and it's
Right.
been calculated that some 2 trillion fishes are caught every year. And what happens are, in general, for the industry, these huge fleets go out there, and there's 3 basic ways that they fish. They can put out um, trawlers, which are like nets that go across the bottom of the ocean and just catch whoever happens to be down there. And in the meantime, they're also destroying coral reefs and bringing up just whatever happens to be there, whoever happens to be there. And also there's gill nets, which are these mile-long nets that they drop hanging vertically in the ocean, and whoever happens to swim into that gets caught. And also long line fishing, where there are these miles-long lines of fishing lines with tens of thousands of hooks on. And not only is it so inhumane the way they're catching these animals, but so indiscriminate, they're also catching dolphins and seals, turtles, even whales and birds. So these animals can be out there suffering for hours or days before they're caught, and then sometimes this gear will get lost or abandoned, and it's called ghost fishing, where it's still catching and killing animals, but they're for naught. They're just, and this can go on for years. And then they'll haul the animals up, and many of them, if they're caught in these big nets, are crushed under the weight of the tons of other fishes that they're bringing up. And then usually they're suffocated, they're left to suffocate, or they can be disemboweled while they're still alive, or frozen while they're still alive. So it's, it can take hours or even days for them to die. It's just so grossly inhumane. And then there's also fish farming, which is looked at as a solution to overfishing, because we're basically desertifying the oceans. We're pulling so many fishes from the oceans. And with fish farming, they have these animals usually in what they call sea pens. So they're like huge nets out in the ocean, close to the coast. And they can be in there for, a couple of years till they're big enough to consider market weight. And they're, crowded conditions, and they're fed all kinds of antibiotics and parasiticides and such to try to keep them alive. And, the disease can spread like wild in there, and also affect the non-captive fishes, and also the feces and uneaten food and dead fishes will sink to the bottom and pollute that water. And they're crawling with sea lice because they're just so crammed together. It's just such a great medium for sea life parasites, and they can transmit those also to the wild fishes. So all these, and then eventually they're also caught and killed, hauled in and killed in same cruel slaughter methods. So it's just inhumane every which way.
Just to think that they're just suffocating to death, and then and or they're just being cut open while they're alive. So there's just no consideration at all for
really not
for these fish at all. And even if there was some sort of consideration, the suffering is just just like every other animal. There's no such thing as humane slaughter, humane ways to do this to animals.
Right. And also, Nicole, there are in some places there are certification systems, and investigation after investigation shows how cruel these systems are too. There's really,
right.
I mean, just throwing these animals, stomping on them, smashing their heads. There's just nothing
awful.
And imagine trying to have oversight over this too, especially when it's out in the ocean. It's just so improbable and so unrealistic to think that there's going to be looking for welfare concerns, which really aren't even a concern when it comes to the industry. So, these called certification systems are, there's nothing humane about them either.
It's just awful. So, so I went to I've been vegan for 15 years. So I was at a grocery store recently in preparation for our interview. And I said, okay, I'm going to make myself go into the fish department. Because I want to see, because you will see whole fish, right? Whole fish laying there in these, I don't know what it's called I know there's like the meat department, the fish department, and grocery stores. And then you see those tanks of lobsters too. And you see these overcrowded tanks, you see these lobsters in here that people are going to purchase and bring home. So can you tell us a little bit more about the other sea creatures, some lobsters, crabs, shrimp?
Yes. Well, for example, for lobsters, they're generally caught in lobster traps, which are these traps they put down in the water with a long line attached to them. And then the lobster will crawl into it. There'll be some kind of bait in there. The lobster will crawl in and not be able to get back out. And in addition to killing these lobsters, a big problem, especially in the Northeast, is that the population of whales, Atlantic right whales, are getting tangled up in these lines, and there's only about 350 of these animals left. They're extremely endangered, and the main reason that they're getting killed is because of these lobster traps that they're getting entangled in, and they can, go suffer for months or years with these ropes entangled on them and weighing them down. And they try to save them, try to go out and rescue them. That's very dangerous, and only certain people are allowed to do that because it is so dangerous. And again, trying to track a whale in the ocean, that's not easy either. So it's
Mhm.
so cruel to the lobsters and to the whales, and all for something that nobody needs to be eating lobsters.
Right. I think some people see lobsters as this, expensive dish and for special occasions, which even is more sickening to me that, people choose different animals to eat for different kinds of celebrations. What do we know about the sentience of lobsters and crabs and shrimp? What do we know about that people don't
Yes,
know?
well,
What do we know that people don't know?
yeah, there is compelling scientific evidence that they too are sentient. They've done experiments, for example, like shocking them, and they behave in ways that indicate that the shock is painful to them. For example, uh, hermit crabs, for example, they like a particular shell, and they've shown they'll prefer one shell to the other. But if they get an electric shock, they'll go for the less favored shell just to avoid the electric shocks. And they also have nervous systems and pain receptors, so there's no reason to think that they aren't sentient either.
Right.
And we actually had a campaign. A lot of people are saying now that it's okay to eat oysters for some reason, as if
Oh, I've heard that too.
yeah, and, they also have a nervous system, but also there are other animals who depend on them for food, who need to eat them, depend on them for food. And we had a campaign here, in the Chesapeake Bay is where these cow-nosed rays, they're like little manta rays. They would come up to the Chesapeake Bay. That's where they would breed and have their nursery grounds. And they are considered one of the most vulnerable to overfishing because they don't mate until they're like 6 or 7 years of age, and they only have one pup a year, the females, mature females. So they're very vulnerable to overfishing. But because they were being blamed for the oyster populations crashing, which in actuality are due to overconsumption by humans and destruction of the oyster reefs by humans and pollution and disease caused by humans, these rays were being scapegoated. So the bow fishers were going out, and these rays tend to stay on the surface of the water. So these bow fishers were going out and shooting them and hauling them up and beating them with metal bats. And then they were having contests weighing them, and see who
Oh,
could get bigger one. And they were doing things like zip tying pregnant females to keep them from giving birth just so they would weigh more. And we went out and documented it with the group Shark. We
yes.
went and documented it and
Mhm.
showing animals respect and kindness. And we documented just how gruesome these contests were. And afterwards, after that, they would just take these animals and dump them by the barrel back into the water, all dead or dying. Um, and so we documented that, and we formed a coalition. We were able to get a moratorium on those contests here in Maryland. But the reason they were having these gruesome contests, and the reason they still go out bow fishing for countless rays, is because they're blaming them for the oysters being eaten. So here's these, and it was shown that that's just a tiny, tiny part of the diet. It's they're definitely not the cause of the oyster population crashes. But when you start saying any animal is safe to eat, you really are starting a slippery slope.
Yes.
No one needs to be eating the oysters and all of the nutrients that we get from fishes and from all animals we can get from vegan sources. So, if you're needlessly harming animals, you're abusing animals.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you talked about that because I didn't have that in my notes. And I remember seeing that maybe in the past year that there were like some vegans that are like, oh, we can eat oysters. And I was like, why? First of all, why would you want to do that? If you're vegan for animals, why would you want to do that? And you have to remember that everything does have a consequence, right? When we use an animal, like you were just saying.
Right.
And then they demonize another animal, to harm. There's always a consequence. And go ahead.
And increasingly we're learning things that were denied animals, how intelligent and how perceptive and how sensitive animals are. So, just because you think this animal isn't capable of sentience, can you prove you can't prove that they aren't, and they deserve the benefit of any doubt.
Right. That's awful. Just and to back up when you were talking about, when fish are captured, then there's dolphins and other animals that are being captured as well. And I want to say that there are groups that kind of want to save the dolphins, but they don't do anything about the fish. Is that right? Is they're like,
Yeah, that's true. It's great that they were trying to save the dolphins, and I applaud them for that. But I mean, the reason they're catching these dolphins is because they're competing with humans for fish. That's really the main reason they're having these dolphin drives. So the best way you can help at really any marine animal is by not eating them. And the fishing industry catches, well, bycatch, they catch along with the 2 trillion fishes they're catching every year. Of course, they're pulling up all these other animals too, which they basically throw back dead or dying for the most part, or they might use them for fertilizer or something like that. But it's just such an incredibly wasteful industry, and also a very polluting industry, because it's getting harder and harder to catch these animals because they're overfishing it closer into the coast, so they're having to go out further and further.
wow. And I know there's environmental movements regarding our oceans and things like that. And we know that vegan, not eating animals, and environmentalists are not in lockstep, which is a whole other episode, I would say. But what do you see on that end of it? The environmental conservation people, like, are they doing anything about this, or?
The conservationists, I think largely they are concerned about populations, keeping populations. Largely what they're concerned about is keeping populations large enough that humans can continue exploiting them. They have really little, if any, concern about the well-being of the individual animals. That's really, in fact, when the documentary Seaspiracy came out,
Mm,
I'm on this one Facebook page, Marine Bio, which is a lot of marine biologists and other people concerned about marine conservation. And they were some of the biggest critics of the movie Seaspiracy. They were just, they're so wed to the idea of
mm,
sustainable fishing that they just can't even think about the obvious solution of just not eating them if you don't
right,
need to. If you have to eat fish to survive, well, that's really unfortunate, and hopefully society can find better ways to help these people, survive. But if you don't need to eat it, that's and it's better for you too, because when you're eating these animals, you're getting, they're so highly toxic with mercury and
mm,
toxins and these forever chemicals and microplastics and parasites and cholesterol, saturated fat. Seafood is promoted as a healthful food, but it's really anything but.
right,
And you can get, again, all the nutrients from vegan sources that are a lot better for you, certainly better for the other animals, and better for the environment. It really just makes sense.
right. So talking about that before we get into the alternatives, there's a lot of, we see it with other farmed animals, right? The humane washing that they put on labels, the organic, the grass fed, the cage free. What are people seeing that so they know that that's not true? So it's probably eco washing. Is eco washing a word? Or humane washing, to make people feel better about that purchase? So
Right.
what kind of things can people see at the store?
Well, there's marine certification. I'm trying to remember the name of the main one. Marine certification. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but there's a number of these different ones. They,
Organic and like, I know the salmon, they have like wild caught and farmed salmon, and I've heard people over the years say, oh, this one's better for you, it's mercury free, or things like that. So they're trying
yeah.
to.
Well, basically all fish really have mercury, and no amount of mercury is good for you. And the wild caught ones are really high in it, because when mercury hits, which is basically formed by coal producing plants, the pollution from coal producing plants,
Mhm.
and when that hits the water, it forms methyl mercury, which is like the most dangerous form of mercury, and that's what you're getting when you're eating wild caught seafood animals, wild caught marine animals. Um, and so, these certification systems basically they don't take humane concerns into consideration. That's really not what their concern. There are some that supposedly do, like for example, the RSPCA over in the UK, they certify systems over there. But there have been recent investigations, numerous investigations that are showing that there's nothing humane about the way these animals are treated, the way they're kept. It's just really it is humane washing. That's what it is.
Right. Right. Yeah, we know that from, all of these the grass-fed farms and I always say there's no right way or better way to abuse an animal or animals are suffering no matter what, and the level of suffering shouldn't matter to anybody. Can they suffer?
And, and ultimately, they're all slaughtered in very inhumane ways. And the way they're kept too, and they can be kept for years till they're to slaughter away. 2 years or whatever for certain fishes. And it's just cruelty throughout.
I know that you've been doing some tabling events lately, and so what is the response you get from people who come to your table? Are some people, like those pescatarians, or are they not vegan or vegetarian? Are they, are they shocked? Are they, when they walk up to your booth, what do people say? What's the first thing you tell people maybe?
Well, we have a very colorful booth, so to attract people, and we have a lot of different fact sheets available for them, and we have not samples but examples of vegan seafood products, and we also have a kids table that is very popular. But usually they come up and we let them know what the fact sheets are. We have one on sentience, we have an environmental fact sheet, a human health fact sheet, and we also have a couple sample vegan tuna recipes, a fact sheet with that on. And generally, that's what seems to get the most interest is the vegan tuna recipes. They're interested in that. And then we let them know that, we have hundreds of recipes, if not thousands of recipes on our website, and that there are vegan seafood cookbooks, and, whatever they want, whatever kind of seafood they want, there is a vegan version of. And we also have a big poster that shows some of the many vegan seafood products that are out there. But generally, it's a pretty good, reception. People are curious about how to get omegas. That's another way to get omegas, and you can get them by walnuts is a good source of omegas, or flaxseed oil, flaxseed, chia seeds, hemp seeds. If you really want a concentrated dose, you can get algae supplements, which is how fishes get their omegas, through algae. So
is that fish oil the same thing as fish oil, the omega-3s? Is that what you get out of fish oil supplements that doctors are always talking about?
That's generally what they're going for. Okay. Yes. And that's very, controversial, that whether they're helpful as far as heart conditions go. They're showing that basically it's really not helpful as far as that goes. And if you it can easily go rancid, fish oil. So especially if you're taking in these gel capsules, you might not even realize it's gone rancid. And if it has gone rancid, it can form free radicals, which are potentially carcinogenic. So not only is it not helpful, it's potentially very harmful to you. Right. So it's much better to get it from natural plant sources.
And doctors recommend that often. I've had my doctor, and I'm like, vegan, remember? And then of course, it's cruel to get the fish oil as well. So it's all cruelty, no matter how fish are. If fish are not in the ocean and they're on land, they're with humans, it's cruelty, plain and simple, right? It's suffering. Yeah. So I love how you have the kids section. Because I think that's where it starts, right? So kids, maybe they've seen Finding Nemo and they love fish in that way. But that whole, like we were talking before with the catch and release and people taking their kids, like my father took me when I was little. It's almost like that rite of passage, like that you have to take your son or daughter fishing, just like you take them to the circus and that kind of a thing. So that's kind of like an entertainment thing, I would say.
Yeah, people think it's a good way to bond with your child, which is so bizarre to think going and torturing and killing animals is a good way to bond. I mean, would you take them to a dog fight or something like that? And that used to be legal, dog fighting, and people thought that was fine, cockfighting. But there's so many ways you can non-violently bond with a child out in nature and get them to appreciate nature and respect animals. If you really want to go fishing, you can go magnet fishing, which is growing in popularity, or they call it trash fishing. where you go in and instead of a hook on the end of the line, you put a magnet and pull up, whatever kind of metal you can find down there. And yeah, we've already seen kids doing
And it
that.
helps the environment too.
Right. So you're helping instead of harming.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
But
like
there's,
that.
of course, there's so many ways to um, engage with children in a helpful, nonviolent, peaceful, good way.
Right. And then what about fish in tanks at pet stores or fish that are given as prizes in the little bags? Which I think is the one well, everything's horrible, but when you think about it that closely and it's just horrible. The fish are given for prizes at state fairs, things like that, and aquariums. And I think people love to go see fish at aquariums too. And this is all for entertainment, and it also has big consequences. But tell us more about some of those things.
Yes. Well, for tropical fish, really, there's few species of tropical fish that they can successfully breed in captivity. So most of these are wild caught fishes. These populations are already having a hard enough time with, ocean acidification and the climate collapse and heating oceans and fishing. So, if you're taking these animals from the wild and they're very sensitive animals, and the great majority of these die before they even get sold, and the ones who do get sold, many of them die soon after because it's hard to, keep them, give them the conditions they need to survive, let alone to thrive. So it's a very cruel industry, and there actually is a documentary called The Dark Hobby, which explores that and shows, the cruelty involved in that. And also for captive bred, that's also, it's not really so different from puppy mills or kitten mills or any of these other things. It's all about profit. They're breeding these animals. There's a huge mortality with that, and keeping them in suboptimal conditions and then shipping them around and selling them. And people see for example, the betas in stores in these tiny little bowls, which is not at all. They think that's their natural type of habitat, but no, in nature they're out in these like they'll be in like rice paddies or these extensive watery grounds, which may be shallow, but they're very extensive. And it's just keeping, and these are animals who are very curious, inquisitive, and perceptive, and keeping them in a little bowl. I mean, it's just so incredibly cruel.
It's awful. And I don't understand why people they buy into that. Like, oh, these are the fish you have to keep by themselves in a little bowl because that's how they like to live. No.
They do tend to be territorial. The males tend to be territorial, but they and you wouldn't want to keep them with females probably either because you don't want them overbreeding.
Right.
But that doesn't mean you should keep them in a tiny little container.
Right.
If you want to have fish, we say for people who want to have fishes for companion animals, go to an animal shelter or a rescue group, or look on like Craigslist for people who want to rehome fishes for free.
Mhm.
And then give them a decent environment, a tank with gallons of water and artificial environment, plants and things for them to explore. And it's possible these animals can get along with certain other species of animals, so they don't have to be kept, totally isolated. And it's a great thing if you do rescue animals, and there are a number of great fish rescue groups out there. So, if
Okay. Another reason to adopt and don't shop. So don't
right,
go to pet stores, don't buy fish from pet stores. There are rescue groups out there. And
right,
you can find rescue groups for any animal because all animals need to be rescued, right?
yeah.
Sadly, they all need to be rescued. But so okay. So we know that there are tons of I like to talk about food, especially because I like to cook, but there are tons of I've seen vegan shrimp in the freezer section at the co-op and maybe Whole Foods. There's an option for everything out there. So talk about that a little bit. And so a lot of people that come to the table, they are interested in the recipes. So that's good. That makes me feel really happy that people want to learn about the alternatives. And what else can people? There's a vegan version for everything, right? So what else can people find out there?
Yes, there really is. And increasingly they're becoming popular even in mainstream grocery stores. You can find, like, for example, Gardein is a brand that has fishless fillets and mini crabless cakes. And even in our local grocery store here, which is not upscale at all, we can get them. And if you also like Whole Foods will have that type of thing, or of course health food stores. Wegmans is a good place, or Harris Teeter, some of the more upscale grocery stores. If you go to Asian markets, they often have a lot of vegan seafood products. And also here, we're in Silver Spring, Maryland, and it also happens to be the world headquarters of the Seventh-day Adventist organization. And they have a wonderful, huge supermarket of vegan products, a lot of vegan seafood. But if you have a Seventh-day Adventist organization in your area, they might have a supply, a good place to go, something like that. But and again, recipes. You can also they have recipes for almost anything you can imagine. There's recipes for it, and a lot of them use very natural ingredients, and some of them are very, very simple ingredients, and it's really just remarkable how people are so imaginative and creating and replicating flavors and textures. And if you serve it with cocktail sauce or tartar sauce, vegan tartar sauce, those are the flavors that people are really looking for. For example, here in Maryland, crab cakes are so popular, and the flavor that's really people look for with that is Old Bay seasoning, which happens to be vegan. So you can make the vegan crab cakes and serve it with Old Bay seasoning and tartar sauce or vegan tartar sauce or cocktail sauce. And people are getting that flavor that they're after without harming animals or harming their health or harming the environment.
That's a good point, that the Old Bay seasoning is like accidentally vegan, right? So there's a lot of things out there that people don't realize. A lot of these seasonings, like, these animals don't taste like that unless we season them, right? So
right.
that's a really great point. And I think a lot of people will be like, really? That's vegan? So that's good.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that.
Right, and fish sauce is very popular in Asian restaurants, but there are commercial brands of fishless fish sauce available now, and also we have recipes for that on the website.
I was doing some research on that because I love sushi, and when I tell people, because when you're vegan, you don't say, "Oh, I'm going to go get a vegan bagel with vegan cream cheese and drink vegan milk with it." We don't use the word vegan for everything. So when I say to somebody who's maybe not vegan, "Oh, we're going to go get sushi," but I thought you don't, like they try to catch you, like you're cheating or something. You don't cheat on animals at all. But they try to say, "Oh, but I thought you didn't eat fish," and I'm like, "Well, no, there's alternatives. There's multiple Japanese restaurants in our area in upstate New York who have so many vegetarian, but vegan options for sushi. There's avocado rolls and peanut avocado rolls and asparagus rolls, and there's tofu, and there's so many different options for that. So even if you're a sushi lover, you could easily just start eating, the vegan sushi and move away from the fish.
Right, and sushi actually just means seasoned rice, so it doesn't mean fish or anything about fish. It just means seasoned rice. And there's even a restaurant chain, Beyond Sushi, that's all vegan sushi. It's all vegan sushi. So again, pretty much whatever you want, there's a vegan version.
Oh, that's awesome. We're going to put all of these things in the books you mentioned and Beyond Sushi and a lot of these things in the show notes so people have access to everything. Okay, so I'm hoping, I think this episode is going to be airing in December. So as an Italian raised person, the Feast of the Seven Fishes. So, which aren't all fish, right? Because there's some crustaceans or there's clams, I know. So clams are not, they're mollusks, right?
Yes.
So I know that, but I don't remember my family doing it a lot as my parents, but I remember my grandparents doing that a lot. And that's a big thing in a lot of, I think it's hard being Italian and going vegan for your family, not for ourselves, but for our family it is, because it's such, every culture has a lot about food, but that whole, building, that Christmas Eve meal around all of these different types of fish. If someone said, well, I have to do that, but there are options out there. So, do you have options? Do you talk to people about that if they talk about that?
Yes. Yes, there are recipes even for something as complicated as the Feast of the Seven Fishes. There's vegan versions of that, and we have that on our links. what we have are links to recipes on the website and
Right.
also links to companies that make vegan seafood products. And a lot of them have store locators on their website. So it's so true. I mean, it's just amazing. When I first started doing this, and I thought, I'll have a seafood section, and I thought, we'll probably have like 5 recipes or something. But I was just amazed. And this was like 10 years ago when I started this, or beyond 10 years ago. Um, I was just amazed at how much was already out there, and more and more all the time. I mean, there's so many recipes now, and some of these are very gourmet, and some of them they go from simple, very simple recipes to very gourmet recipes. And it's true, you can have whatever you want, and why not serve your family something humane and healthful and environmentally sustainable?
Mhm. Yes, thank you so much. And thank you for all the work you do because it's such important work. I think that, by getting that question all the time and well, you eat fish, right? I still don't understand it. So, you start telling people things like, well, I don't eat anything with a face or with eyes or with a mother, and it's like, no, we need to talk about what happens to fish, how they suffer, how they die, and how there's no reason for it. And they're
Yes,
not
and
just objects.
right, they're
Mhm.
sentient beings that
Yeah.
science has shown, and as should be obvious to any sensible person. But I think one thing I wanted to mention that I neglected to mention before is that, people are looking towards fish farming as a solution to overfishing, but it's actually a huge part of the problem because such a huge percentage of wild caught fishes are used as food for farmed fishes and farmed shrimps and also farmed pigs and chickens. So, it's also propping up those industries, and it's just wiping out the oceans and all for something that's, bad for us too.
Awful. It's awful for the animals and the environment and I think that that's a great point because we see how all of this flows through to all the other animals and it's just when there's cruelty to one animal there's cruelty to all animals
It's
at the
all
same
connected.
time. It's all
Right.
connected, all these food animals. So y- we're probably going to have you back again to talk about more things but I think this is great. We're going to definitely pull some recipes. Like I love having like a chickpea salad sandwich instead of a tuna. We used to call it two not fish, like, and I always tell people about that. It was one of my first things I ate when as I was becoming vegan. Um, but you're very active. You're tabling a lot. Your website is chock full of information, and I really want people to go. It's fishfeel.org. Check it out, read some of the articles, look at the recipes. We'll post some. But I ask all of our guests because we're very we're animal forward. So we want people to learn about, like we learned about today, about fish and about other sea creatures and what they endure every day for humans. But we want people to advocate too. So I have a couple more questions for you if you don't mind sticking around for a few more minutes. So the first one is, well, I'll ask what other people can do. So what can we do as just humans or vegans? What can we do to get the message out? How can we advocate for fish and other sea creatures?
Yes, well, it's really, quite easy to do. Just whatever opportunities you have. For example, serve your family, your friends, vegan seafood products. Let them know how delicious and healthful they are, and how easy they are. Um, we have a very active Facebook page, and you can share our posts. You can write letters to the editor. Just touching back on the fairs, we didn't really get into that very much about
Oh, yes.
where they're giving fishes away for
Oh, yes,
prizes.
please. Mhm.
They actually just banned that in Connecticut, and it's banned in a few other states. And we have fact sheets on our website about how you can help to get these bans in your state or your city. Your city also, just wherever you can do it.
Oh, I
Uh,
love that.
yeah, and share posts and mainly just let people know that fishes are sentient beings. It's a great idea if you can educate yourself on the issues and just read through a few fact sheets and let other people know that they are, that fishing is cruel. It's not a sport. The fish are victims. They're not willing participants. And there's so many other ways to, enjoy yourself out in nature without harming wildlife. Um, and there's the wonderful book, What a Fish Knows. We also have T-shirts, Fish for Real T-shirts. I'm wearing one right now. I don't know if you can see it, but
Oh,
we
I
have
love it.
and we have a children's book, An Underwater Friend, about a little boy who goes fishing and with his father, and he's so excited to go and they actually catch a fish, and then he realized how the fish is suffering, so they take the fish home and befriend the fish and help him, and then eventually release him. So for children, that's a great way to help them realize. And we have coloring books also. We give away coloring books at some of these youth fishing rodeos. We go there very non-confrontationally and give them the coloring books, which they're glad to have, and it has a anti-fishing message at the end, and also fact sheets. And we also hand them out when we're tabling. And getting through to children is a really good way to get this message across. And lots of times these children will influence their parents too. So sharing posts on Facebook, writing letters to the editor, calling into radio shows, talk shows, just any which way you can get across the message that fishes are as sentient as any other beings and as deserving of respect and compassion as any other sentient beings.
Thank you so much. There's so many ways to help, and I encourage everyone to go to the website and look at different ways, different things you can do, ways to help, to educate people. Let's go talk just really quick about the fish that for prizes. How did that sounds like grassroots activism.
Yes. I think because you can obtain fishes for so inexpensively, so cheaply, even if you go to the pet store, they have what they call feeder goldfish that they're selling for like 17 cents a piece. I mean, these are just, it's a little life and it's sold for
Oh.
seven. Yeah. So these animals they can obtain them so cheaply, and just keeping them in those conditions, they just keep in big tanks and transporting them around. Just being at a fair, of course, you can imagine, is so stressful for these animals. And the reason this ban went across in Connecticut recently, apparently one state representative was really promoting it, and it was his daughter who had been to a fair, and she saw kids just like tossing the bags of fish around. And another thing that happens less times, people realize they don't really want these animals, so they'll dump them out into a waterway, and there they will probably die. But if they survive, and goldfish are pretty hardy animals, they'll be competing with other animals, and they can become invasive. And it's a real problem. It's a huge problem, really, in the United States. So
Yeah,
it's just allowing this is just. Can you imagine giving away puppies or kittens or any other animal?
I
And
know.
someone who just
To children, to young children who
right, who just
they don't
happen,
know what to do.
yeah,
For to have any animal as a companion animal, you have to do research, and it's too many people, they impulse buy rabbits and dogs and cats and fish too, and they think that this is a starter pet, right? The goldfish.
right.
Well, if you can take care of a goldfish and not kill it, then that's your starter pet, and it's just I can't wrap my head around that. So where else have there been bans on the is it animals as prizes or fish specifically?
There are a few other states that have banned fishes as prizes. In Connecticut now, they already had a ban, but they added fishes to it.
Oh, that's
So,
great.
but again, that's an example where why were they left off in the first place?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
So everybody out there, if you have an opportunity to do any kind of grassroots activism, get a few friends and try to get a ban on this. Because it's just one other ways they exploit animals at state fairs. Any kind of little, even a carnival that just comes, they're going to do that, where they're going to give you a fish as a prize, and it's just terrible.
it's
Um,
so irresponsible.
so this is a lot of heavy stuff. So, and you do this every day. So I ask all of our guests, what do you do for fun? What do you do to avoid burnout? How do you take breaks from all of this? Because I think that's really important. So as we're asking people in our podcast, to be advocates, we want to encourage everybody, to get out there and do something today for fish. Don't eat fish, find an alternative recipe and get out there and fight for every fish in the world. so, um, but we want to remind people that we do have to, we're not just, we dedicate our lives to this, and we're not asking people, maybe that doesn't fit for everybody, but how do you take breaks? Because this is sad work.
And a very upbeat way you can also promote respect for fishes is to share. There's so many marvelous videos every day. People are posting incredible videos of fish that they see while they're out snorkeling or scuba diving,
Mm.
and explaining just how marvelous these animals are. So that's a great way. We post a lot of that to try to keep things lighter. Posted a lot of that also, just explaining how marvelous these animals are. But what I like to do, fortunately, I really enjoy the work that I do. But yes, you do need a break from it. And the way I try to keep sane is I really love to garden. So I love gardening. As
I
that's
love that.
yeah. Fortunately, I have a yard, so I love really flamboyant flowers. So I love to garden. That's what.
Oh, that's great. I think looking at beautiful things, especially that you create, does definitely help, and it energizes you and things like that. And it's a different outlet. So that's great.
Yes, and it's a great source for, you can help the butterflies and the moths and the bees, and it's a great way to help wildlife too.
Oh, yes, that's right. It
Yeah.
is. Mary, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you would like our listeners to know before we are done for today? But we'll definitely
Well,
want to have you back.
thank
There's so
you.
much more.
Thank you so much for having us on. Thank you for your interest and your concern for fishes and your compassion for all animals and your work for horses, which is so essential. Horse racing is big here in Maryland too. So
Mhm.
really appreciate
Do a
your
lot of work.
efforts
A
and
lot of work in Maryland.
activism.
We have a great team there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But we certainly invite people to visit the website fishfield.org. Again, we're very active on Facebook. If they'd like to be included in our mailing list, just send us an email to info@fishfield.org. And if they have any questions, we'd love to try to answer them and help them advocate for fishes too. Really appreciate that.
Thank you so much. And
They desperately need all the help we can give them.
they do. And that's why it means so much for me to have you. And I'm so grateful for your existence in this world and for the existence of Fish Field, because it's a perfect name, because it just, it says it right there, and people can learn. And thank you so much for what you do. And I hope a lot of people learned a lot of things today, and they'll go to your website and take some action for fish today. So thank you again, Mary. And like I said, I'm sure we'll have you back again to talk about fish and aquatic animals.
Yeah.
For me to list out every aquatic animal there is. But thank you again so much. And I really appreciate you being here and all you do for fish and all the aquatic animals on this planet.
Thank you very, very much.
Hey there, animal lovers. Nicole here from In Behalf of Animals. We hope you love our show as much as you love animals. And if you do, can you take a quick action to help amplify their voices? Simply follow our podcast and write us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening right now. It helps new listeners discover the show and to learn more about how they can help animals. Thank you again for being part of this great community. We appreciate your support. And remember, be a voice for the animals every chance you get.